All right. Good evening, everyone.
Good
Good
evening.
good
Can you?
evening. You kind of sounding low, Bobby. You
Oh,
got
am
to,
I? Okay, hold
yeah.
on.
Yes, good evening. Good evening.
Let me fix that. Is it better?
Yes, I can hear you
Yes, good.
I
much
can hear
much
you.
better.
Okay, great. Well, welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen, or lady and gentlemen. Thanks for gracing us with your presence, Cole. My name is Borby Brople, and I'll serve as the host for this show today. We'll be discussing economic business and economic empowerment for Liberians here in the U.S. and in Liberia. With a specific emphasis tonight will be placed on what's currently happening in the U.S. with regards to the banking sector, and that's what we'll be talking about tonight. So, without further ado, I'd just like for everybody to give a brief bio because we don't have it recorded. Just say something brief about yourself, your academic or professional background, and then we'll go ahead and get started. So I'll start off with Cole.
Yeah, so I did public policy, political science, and public policy, University of Wisconsin, University of Minnesota, Twin Cities campus. And I have a wealth of experience in the public sector and just got back into the private sector after being in the public sector for quite a number of years, both in Liberia and the US. Um, that's about it. Back in the private sector where I started out many years ago.
All right, thank you so much, and then we'll go to Mr. Aliu Mazale.
Thank you guys for having me on this show. My name is Aliyu Masale. I'm an architectural project manager. I am the founder of the Liberian Leadership Summit, where we bring together speakers from the US and Liberia to share some leadership insight with emerging leaders, business leaders, religious leaders in Liberia. And our goal is to uh, build the first leadership academy in Liberia. So I'm glad to be here and thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mazale. Glad to have you, and then we'll move on to Mr. Willie Dillon.
Yes, so as you stated, my name is Willie Dillon. I work in the banking sector. I work as a fraud analyst, fraud investigator. Um, I did all of my schooling here in North Carolina. I did an undergrad with a business concentration in accounting. Uh, Graduate studies was financial fraud investigation, emphasis cyber forensics, and I've been working in the banking field since banking field financial sector, and I have a small consultancy where I do taxes, help people
Okay.
restructure their credit, and teach financial independence, financial freedom, and we sell life insurance and things of such.
All right, excellent. Thank you very much. Um, Mr. George is muted right now, but he is the president of the Liberian Business Association here in the U.S. He's based in Minnesota. He travels to Liberia quite frequently, and so he understands conditions on the ground in Liberia as well as here in the U.S. Um, my name once again is Borby Bropley. I'm a financial professional. I specialize in personal finance, and I've been in the financial services industry for nearly 2 decades. All right. Oh, how could we miss Mr. Chuchu Alex Jones? My goodness.
I know.
Sorry, sir.
Anyways, yeah. Alex Chuchu Jones. I'm the founder, CEO of Alex Jones and Associate. That is internet trading, derivative trading firm based in Houston. Have extensive background in consulting, management consulting, and finance.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Jones. Um, you left a key component of your professional background, but we'll leave that for now. Or your
Okay.
aspiration.
Oh, presidential aspirant.
Yeah, I can leave that out. So let's go ahead and jump right in, ladies and gentlemen. I'll just throw it out there. Are we out of the woods with regards to this banking crisis? Let's start off with Mr. Jones. Are we out of the woods? Because we were on a show on Friday. How are things now?
Well, as we predicted, Credit Suisse was not, or as I predicted, that Credit Suisse was not going to survive this weekend. They're being bought for $1. This was a company that was worth at least $70 billion a few years ago, and due to the bad management and irresponsible behavior, today they are being acquired through a government build-out, which is horrific. Um, and so we are not out of the woods yet. I predict that more banks are going to collapse, especially in the US, and it's going to spread to bigger banks. At least one of the 20 major banks going to get in serious trouble, and because all due to just greed and mismanagement. So this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Wow. So a company that's what 166, 167 years old has collapsed, and you say that stock was the company was purchased for $1 a stock or $2 a
Let's
stock.
not less than $1, which are an outrage because they should not have been purchased for anything. They have no value, and I think the equity investor should not have been given that. The bond investors suffer, and this is some of the global corruption we are talking about. The company fail. We should learn in capital markets that companies do fail, and
Mhm.
government should not come in to support any particular investor, equity or bond investor. But this is what's going on, and that's part of the corruption. That's part of the problems we're having today with too big to fail, the inequality in society. When the small man gets in trouble, the government does not come in. So
Yeah.
why, you know, should governments be building out any big bank, mid-sized bank? Lastly, I would say all these banks in 2008 rather, they were too big to fail, and those banks should have been broken up. All right, and these banks pay a lot of lobbyists in Washington, all right, to keep their corporate golden parachute and excesses. And, you know, now we have a problem. So I think this is just a tip of the iceberg, and it's bad for everybody.
Okay. Um, Madam Cole, um, I mean, you've worked in the public sector and private sector, both in Liberia and here. One of the things
Right.
that we're discussing during our last show on Friday was the impact of this global banking crisis on a country like Liberia. Could you possibly throw some light on that?
I mean, so I look at things more, I always like to look at things historically, right? So I always look at things in as a continuum and what happened before and how were things handled. Um, we had a number of crises going back to even the 19th century, and everyone knows about the Depression. I said the Great Repression, same thing. The Great Depression in the early 20th century. We've had a series of issues, even in the 21st century as well. This is probably the biggest global banking crisis that we've had in the last 25 years, but it's not anything new. These are ebbs and flows, and these are things that continuously repeat. The government constantly bails out the banking sector, and then we go on from there. How these things affect Liberia tremendously. The first thing is Liberia doesn't have its own. We're using the U.S. dollar. So anything that occurs in the United States, even if it's not a global issue, just affecting the United States by default will affect Liberia. Um, but as far as things getting worse in Liberia before they get better, or things getting worse in the United States before they get better. If you put things in historic context, I think a lot of lessons have been learned. I want to disagree with Alex a little bit, because when the government bails these people out, it's not because it's about them being rich. It's about the domino effect. You have other industries depending on these banks, and if the government doesn't step in to assist, there will be catastrophic loss for all the other related industries as well. So the problem with the banking sector is it affects so many other aspects of life, so many other aspects of other corporations. There's just too much involved in this for us to say the government's just bailing out wealthy people. I mean, that's not really what it's about. It's about looking at the system and saying, hey, if we hold this industry up in this way, all these other industries will not collapse as a result. So sometimes in public policy, you have to make really difficult decisions that might not feel very good for the layperson, because they say, okay, if something happens to me, I have to file bankruptcy. I have to lose all of my assets. So why do you prop up the banks? Because the banks prop up a lot of other industries as well. That's the reason. So if something like that isn't done, we're going to be in a much worse situation, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I agree. There's going to be some effect of allowing the banks to crumble. But let me bring in another uh, banker here, and then I'll come to Mr. Ali Madalay. So, Mr. Dillon, what's your take on the matter? Do you feel like the government should uh, bail out the depositors but not the investors? On the one hand, on the second hand, what happens to international depositors and investors? Because I was watching a news from India, and they seem to suggest that Indians have lost a lot. Indian tech firms, startup firms have lost a lot of money in SBB, and they might not get paid back. What's your take on that?
Well, basically, in regards to everything that's going on now with Signature Bank, then SBV, and even Credit Suisse. With Credit Suisse, their situation really is not connected to what's happening here in America, but truly it all comes down to confidence. The whole monetary system comes down to the confidence of the people, and if at all the people don't have confidence in the bank, they're going to do a bank run, and that's going to lead to the bank crumbling. And as Cole stated before me, once a financial system or a bank crashes, the entire financial system feels it, and then that trickles down into other sectors of the economy. So I mean, really, the government cannot allow that to happen. But I think the suggestion that Alex made is a good one, where yeah, they could break these big institutions down into smaller ones, sort of like the banking sector in Germany. In Germany, they have a lot of smaller banks that work with specific industries, and they all work hand in hand without having a lot of big institutions that are too big to fail. Now, as far as like international investors in these banks, I'm not really sure if they're covered by the FDIC insurance. And the FDIC insurance over the depositors' accounts only up to $250,000. So anything beyond that, you're pretty much on your own. So for me, I feel like there has to be real reform that goes on in the financial system, or else what I've seen, or from the past going forward, is once everybody gets bailed out, we go right back to business as usual, and then there's another crash, and then people get bailed out, they go right back to business as usual. But
Yeah.
there has to be real
Okay. I think we may have lost
Being a
Dylan.
frozen.
So let me bring in Mr. Ali Mazaleh. So there's a lot going
system.
on here, Mr. Mazaleh. I know you're not in the banking or financial sector, um, but just as a oh, you're back. Okay. By the way, we're getting a little feedback from somebody. Somebody has
It
a
might be me. Let me go ahead and mute.
okay. Yeah, Dilla, I'll let you finish since you were in the middle of your statement before. Your system froze up. Go ahead.
Yes, so I think there's need for real regulatory reform, because as I stated, what we have seen, even from as far back as what Cole was saying, the 20s with the depression going forward, we had in the 80s they had a savings and loan crisis, they had the bond crisis all throughout the 80s, and then we had what happened here in 2008 in the dot-com situation in the early 2000s. All of these things are because the rules are skewed towards one group of people. Every time it happens, people get bailed out. And then at the end of the day, or these big institutions get bailed out. And at the end of the day, they may change the players at the head or at the top, but they go right back to business as usual. So I do
Wow.
think there has to be real reform, whereas, the entire system is looked at and change can be brought about in a more feasible fashion.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir. And on to Mr. Mazale. I know you were recently in Liberia. You spent about a month in Liberia um, at your leadership summit that you set up. Coming to banking in Liberia, and we've had discussions. We had discussions earlier today about leadership in Liberia. How does something like this happening in the international community, as far as finance and banking, affect Liberia? And what can Liberia do in terms of leadership to prepare for situations such as these?
Well, thank you, Bobby. As you read the bully, I'm now a financial expert, and so I'll just try to give my own little input or insight for what. Okay, so I was in Liberia for leadership summit. It's going to be our annual leadership summit where I bring people from the United States, leaders from the United States, and bring together emerging leaders, religious leaders, women leaders, just leaders from Liberia to sit and discuss, leadership development. And the summit went well so much that people requested that we do it. So we're going to do it again. So as it relates to the institution of Liberia, I mean the overall institution, I show the banking institution is something that will be impacted by this too. We don't have a better system in Liberia as compared to the US, obviously, or even if we have the station, the rules and regulations are not followed to the letter as compared to the US. So a break in the systems in the US definitely going to affect our system, like Paul was already saying. Matter of fact, the money we use in Liberia, we use more of the United States data. So whatever effect the dollars over here is going to impact our data in Liberia and our institution in Liberia. Now, coming to a point that Kaum made earlier on, she said that protecting the institution is something that the government needs to do, and we should not just look at it as the government protecting the people or the rich people or whatever we will term them to be. I think that's something that the government needs to do because the financial sector impact or affects all other sectors of life. So whatever goes wrong in the sector is going to impact. But my only concern would be that if the government is going to protect the institution, they should be able to punish the individuals because some of these guys play dirty to enrich themselves, and we, quote unquote, the common people suffer from their own greed. So that would be my only concern.
All right. Great. Do you want to respond to that briefly, Cole, so we can, and then we'll move on to Mr. Jackson?
Absolutely. So really quick, I just wanted to say that anytime the government bails out any industry, it's not just nothing happens. It's followed by stringent regulation changes. And you've got like the last financial crisis, the last real recession we had was around 2008. Then you had the creation of the Dodd-Frank Act. So there's always this legislation, there's always public policy that comes to correct situations in the past. So out of this is going to be even tighter, more stringent regulations. And then, greed also will push the envelope even further, and people find new ways to do things that are not so correct. Unfortunately, a lot of times public policy is not something that projects forward. It's usually based on things that have happened in the past, and then there's corrective action to resolve issues. So the issues that led to this current situation, you better believe are going to get regulated. You know, there's going to be new laws and rules passed. Are there going to be new ways to create chaos? Of course, that's what the whole evolution process is about. But I just don't want people to think that decade after decade things occur and then nothing's done about it. But you know, there will be stringent regulations that come into play based on past occurrences.
Interesting you say that, Cole, because the Dodd-Frank Act was passed after the 2008 crisis. But then didn't it get rolled back, Choo Choo? This was parts of it did get rolled back. I
Some of
think it
it.
was 2015, wasn't it? Alex?
You on
Can't
mute.
hear you, Alex.
You
You're
on mute.
muted. He
You
might
on
be.
mute, Chuchu.
Oh, he said give them a minute. Yeah, I believe parts of it got rolled back, Cole, and the funny thing is, now we're in a similar we're in a similar situation again. But Alex, when
Oh,
it
you're
comes to
talking about, I'm sorry to interrupt. You're talking about what Trump did in 2018? Because
yeah,
Martin Luther Trump, oh, okay, I was confused. Okay, yeah, not in 2008, but in 2018 with Trump is what you're talking about, right? Okay,
right.
I was like, got you. Yeah, go ahead, please.
The regulations came into to force. I think it was put into force probably around 2010, 2009, 2010, the Dodd-Frank Act. And then in 2018, we saw major parts of it rolled back, and now we're in a kind of a similar situation again. Alex, are you
Yeah,
available
yeah,
now?
yeah. And this is something that I actually worked on in terms not worked on with the government, but I work on the Dodd Frank C car, which is the capital ratio analysis with Citibank. And in my opinion, all right, none of these things they're not far reaching enough. To be quite honest with you, they're not far reaching enough. In 2008, I remember when we had the crisis, the housing crisis, and everything. There was a committee that was set up,
Mhm.
and there were recommendations that were made. Okay, and by very very sound economists, Larry Summers, Paul Volcker, all these people came out and said these banks pose systemic risk to the system. Okay, they advised the Obama administration precisely. There were two schools of thought: carry on the stress test, which came out of the Dodd-Frank and the C card, or break these banks up. When I mean break a bank up, it doesn't mean that you're gonna just go in there and checkla everything. All right. You can do it in an orderly, responsible way where, for instance, you have a bank which is responsible for deposit. That bank should not be involved in risky investment banking, trading, and other aspects. Take those like how I used to be doing the what you call the Sabine Oxley. Take those divisions out of those banks, all right, and let them operate as investment bank or as insurance company or as wherever. That way, if something goes wrong with it, if you are an investor, you want to invest in a bank, you should only invest in a bank. That way, you know what you're investing in. But most of these banks, they're like chop shops. Even the CEOs. I remember a city, the CEO said did not know what was going on in his bank. Victor Pandit. Okay.
Wow.
They made a joke on him that if he were running city or city were running him. The Treasury Secretary, Jenna Yellen, she said it was 2 weeks ago she even heard about the Silicon Valley Bank. All right. And the reason I say this, yes, we may survive this crisis. All right. They will do something to flamingo things. They will, at the end of the day, you cannot have this kind of behemoth with personal interest, CEOs making $10 million, $15 million bonuses. If I'm paid as a banker a bonus, to, my pay is based on bonus. What do you think I'm going to do? I'm going to figure a way to make the most bonus, even at the risk of taking down the whole bank. We saw that with rogue traders and so forth. So I'm just saying it's irresponsible. Other countries like Singapore, they don't have this kind of banking, crisis. There are a lot of countries that have banks, and you rarely hear about, these kinds of things that we've been having even before the Federal Reserve was created. In fact, that's why the Federal Reserve was created, to prevent these kinds of, systemic problems and a lack of confidence in the banking industry. And I think it has gotten worse.
Well, you mentioned banks in Singapore and other countries not operating as U.S. banks. So let me pivot and bring in Mr. George to talk a little bit about that, because I know he frequents Liberia and he has businesses there, and you kind of understand to a large extent the nature of banking in Liberia. What kind of impact do you think this crisis will have on banks in Liberia? Number one. Number two, how are the banks in Liberia structured?
Wow. Well, just to piggyback to Alex's point, is that I think we have greater transparency in the United States. So people can tell you some of those things. In some other countries, they hide those things and you don't even know that they're happening, and government heavily come in to solve some of those problems.
Okay.
But I think Liberia, the impact, there will be impact. There is impact, but I think we'll survive. We have a very small economy, and so I think we will survive it. How the banks are structured in ways that, I mean, how many individuals got loans in Liberia that are, I mean, real loans that are going through systems and building massive infrastructure that depends on government or on banks to do those things. So we are, I mean, I don't want to say, but our entire budget could be a university budget, right? Here.
Our national budget in
Correct.
Liberia?
Yeah, maybe
Not even a university budget, like
okay,
a high school.
I just want to
Like a
leave it at
major
that,
high school in a suburban area.
Okay, I want to leave it at that. But what I'm saying, I think we
Are
survive.
you guys serious? The high school budget could be the same?
No,
Yeah,
I mean,
because
the University of Minnesota budget alone, is way beyond
Wow.
something of that nature.
yeah.
But I think we'll survive
Mhm.
because we're a small economy, and we've had banks closure before in our country. Hopefully, we've learned the lessons from the past, and we are putting in the necessary measures to ensure that it doesn't happen. But again, like I said, how many massive loans are going off for infrastructural development, all the kind of things that would put strain on our banking system. So, we is there work to be done? Yes, a lot of work to be done. Do we have the infrastructure to withstand what's happening in the West? No, but again, because we are not so sophisticated, we will be able to survive this crisis with minimum effect, not with greater effect.
Mr. George, it begs the question: who are the biggest users of banks in Liberia in that case?
Hmm. Well, I would say government.
Oh, the government?
Oh, well, yeah.
I would think maybe some of the businesses.
Oh, I think government is the largest employer. So if government is the largest employer, then government uses most of the banking instruments. But then you got the private sector that's supposed to be the second. Then you go into the individual users. So that's, to me, that's how it works, from the government to the private sector and then to individual users. Government
Tell
has
me,
most of the
the
contracts.
how does
Yeah,
the
I
average
think I would
Liberian
believe
use banks?
I would
Say that
believe,
again.
I say I believe government is we have the highest
Oh yeah,
usage.
yeah.
How does the average Liberian living in Liberia use banks?
Well, I think most of the time it seems as though it is depository banking.
Mhm.
People
Okay.
go in and put their banks. When I go to Liberia and see people online to collect their own money, sometimes you're spending to deposit your money. You're spending 2-3 hours online to deposit your money. I wonder are these people normal? Why would I want to stay online to invest to put my money into a bank that I have to, I'm putting my money here. It should be faster because the
Right.
banks need my money, right? And
And
then when
taking
you
it
go to
out.
get, yeah, when you go to get your money, oh, it's another, I sometimes I wonder how that works, but it's a system that is very slow and and
Well,
and
tell me,
and
why are they putting their money in the bank?
I
If
think
it's
it
and, and,
will be for security purpose.
and more for security. Instead
Yeah.
of
okay,
having a large stack of money home, let me just
hmm
put it in the bank. But to say that they are benefiting from the banks, the ordinary person on the street who deposits his money into the bank, they're not benefiting from the bank at all.
Yeah.
Can I come in with just a little point of injection?
absolutely.
So,
So,
thank you. So in 2010, 2009 to 2010, uh, the Liberian government came up with this policy that in order to get rid of a lot of ghost names, they like to call them, or to try to finance ministry to better organize payroll, that all government employees, all civil servants, all teachers, all police officers, all military, everyone that's on government payroll will receive their pay through Echo Bank.
um,
And that's when you saw a lot more usage. That's when you start to realize, whoa, this is really how many government employees there are in this country. Because then all of a sudden, Echo Bank grew exponentially and had to open branches all over the country to support this agreement with the government so that everyone could access the resources. And of course, you can't get a bank account if you don't have an ID. So ghosts cannot
Right.
have bank accounts to go collect money and all of these kinds of things. So that was how you saw a lot of teachers and just ordinary people starting to have to wait in line to receive their pay at these banks because a lot of times they didn't have the ability to absorb all of these new customers. Especially when the deposit, there's no, people aren't having debit cards where they can go and pay their bills or buy their food with debit cards. You have to go and take the cash out. So they had to
wow.
stand in line, take all of the cash out. They would end up clearing the bank account. Next pay period, next month, they go back and do the same thing. So I just wanted to
But
add to put that
but
in
I
there.
think the banking institutions in Liberia will have to do a little more better job in terms of how they deal with the customers. I mean, there's no way you spend 2 hours in the bank just to deposit your money, or to even withdraw your money. Management will have to find a workable solution to the problem. Uh, and so when these things happen, like what we having now in the United States, yes, it does have effect on our economy. And hopefully people are not panicking to go to the bank and take out all the money from the bank because they think there's going to be a global crisis coming. In that case, then it hurts the institution that is there. But I'm hoping that they don't do that.
Um, well, yeah, I agree with that. But let me just ask a question. Um, and maybe Mr. Dillon can speak to this. Who who's the is Liberia a heavily import based economy as far as some
Well,
of the goods and services that we use or not?
well,
That's an easy
as
question.
far as okay, I'm sorry. I thought you said you wanted me to, but you
Oh
guys
yeah,
can go
yeah.
ahead.
Go ahead, Dillon. Yeah.
Yeah. So, um, well, a country like Liberia, what we do is we export a lot of extractive, you know, commodities like mostly iron ore, gold, and things of that nature. So, rubber, stuff like that. So at the end of the day, those things, those commodities, the prices are not controlled by us ourselves. They're not finished products. So, the ebb and flow of our economy really depends on commodity prices on the international market, right? But we do import a lot as well because we need the machinery, we need finished products, and even the rice that that we eat. We spend close, millions of dollars on that instead of growing our own rice. So yes, we do import a lot, but our economy, because of that, a lot of foreign reserves go out in that way, and that impacts the economy in a negative fashion as well. So I don't know if I don't know if that's the response you were seeking, but that's the nature on a just a general level of our economy.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is that fundamentally the banks are fine. Where we could run into some trouble is if there's a run on the banks. Is that correct, or
That
am I
is absolutely not correct. The
okay?
Are
banks in
you
Liberia,
waiting for?
the banks in Liberia are not fine. The banks in Liberia is just another corrupt entity that is supported by a corrupt central bank and a corrupt government. Okay, I'm here looking at even the shareholders in the banks in Liberia, and you know, and we need to say these things. LBDI hire a CEO or president, as we know, a few months ago. It was clear that many government officials owe the government, they never pay back their loans. Okay, and these are some of the corruption that got our country where it is. You can argue, oh, the CEO wish to hire, because I'm sure any responsible company will have a hiring committee and they will vet the president of a bank. First of all, to show you how incompetent they are, according to them, they didn't even check this man credential. They made him the president.
Mr.
All
Jones, are
right.
you talking personal loans?
Yes,
People are taking
personal loans. Okay.
taking out personal
Uh,
loans. Wow. Okay.
Personal loans. In fact, the LBDI bank is just another good old boss bully banks that takes money from the people who deposit their money and give it to their corrupt government friends.
Uh, uh,
It's
Alex,
public knowledge.
Alex, can I hold you to a
Yeah,
point and ask you a question? I'm a businessman,
absolutely.
right? I'm a businessman,
Absolutely.
and
Absolutely.
I have no political affiliation right now. But my
Yes.
question though is, when it happens in the United States, we can easily say, I've never heard us or publicly saying, I think I called the Fed, trying to hold the Fed to the same standard. But why when it happened in the United States, we find structure and we say, you could use the same words to say what happened to the two banks here, they are corrupt. They gave the money to their families and their friends. They ran the banks down. I mean, there's no better system than what you are
All right.
describing.
Okay, so I think I started my opening statement with the banks here should not be built up. They were terrible, the ones that went down, and more will go down. If you've been watching the news, the difference between people in Liberia and people here, if you've been watching the news, people here, many people criticize the bank, including government officials, including Elizabeth Warren, who just called for the Federal Reserve that he should not be the Federal Reserve. She has been saying it for a long time. So it's not like a double standard. There's a huge corruption in the U.S. banking system. All
Okay.
right, it just like Liberia, the difference is. So I mean, if you watch Mohammed Aaron, who now I think the Queen's University president, ran a huge company, bond fund before. So people are outspoken. I don't know why this is. If you watch CNBC every day, you watch Bloomberg every day. Even the Swiss build up. The Swiss government came and said this is not a build up. Before the next morning, everybody was on a case that this is a build up. And guess what? As you can see, people started selling the shares of those banks. So it's not something personal. Why do people think in Liberia like anybody has the energy or time just to go and cherry pick and say, "Oh, you're just bad"? The fact remains they are corrupt. They are inadequate, not just corrupt. At least here they're corrupt, but they are not as inadequate as the people there. And at least you have responsible representatives and senators that are very outspoken. The central
So
bank governor goes to the chambers, I think 3 times a year. They grill him. They grill the finance minister. They ask intelligent questions. They co-say they pass regulation. And so in some cases they even put people in jail.
so let me ask you a question.
When last in Liberia has any government official, you want to tell me the whole country there's no corrupt government official that is indicted? Yeah, they indict people all the time, including bankers all around the
Let me
world.
be practical. Let me be more practical. Aliu Mazale, if you had $50,000 in a bank in Liberia, will you feel comfortable?
No. I
Wow.
wouldn't feel comfortable. The
Okay.
possibility or the probability of losing that 50,000 without any consequences or without getting my money back is as high as compared to me having that same 50,000 over here and saving it in
Okay.
your bank over here. So I wouldn't feel comfortable with the banks in
Okay. So
Liberia.
that's consumer confidence, right? It's low. Is it more so what's happening currently in the banking sector, or just normally you wouldn't feel comfortable?
I
It
think
just
normally I wouldn't feel comfortable because of the current climate in Liberia. I'm not trying to bash Liberia, but we all know that we have some inadequacies that need to be fixed. So I wouldn't invest. I wouldn't save $50,000 in a bank in Liberia.
Mr. Moderator, can I just land because the gentleman, Mr. Josh, interrupted me just so I finish my point, my expose
that
on.
was it.
That was it, my
All
man.
right.
Okay.
Take
So,
30 seconds.
so
A man,
yes,
Because
a man got to store money in the bank over there to be
I
personal.
when I go to store the amount I need to register as an independent candidate, right after that, I'm gonna get my money back until we fix the bank. And I'm not saying I don't want our economy to be good. I don't want to invest in Liberia, but I'm not going to support corruption and mismanagement and bad practices by both the central bank, the government. You have a central bank in Liberia, okay? And I reviewed the balance sheet in the statement where they pour there. They are giving loans in excess of millions of dollars to employees.
wow,
Anywhere
millions of
in the country that would be anywhere else would be criminal. How you
hold
can?
that thought.
And
Hold
I
that
can
thought.
show you on the balance sheet. So
Okay.
that kind of broad highway robbery and just complete disregard in like that goes on in Liberia. And lastly, like I said, LBDI should be your investment and development bank. Why are you giving McGill $200,000 to build a house? Is his house going to bring any industrialization? Is his
Is
house
that
going to hire
proven?
people? So these are the kinds of stupidity that we have in Liberia, where the people are suffering, and this is the reason they're suffering. Why are you giving Samuel Jackson loan money? And he passing around with a hot chick, he
But
can't pay
Joseph,
back
can
his
you
loan.
verify those allegations?
This is
Are they
public knowledge. It's on the mark. It's in the newspaper.
okay?
Allegedly.
It's not
Okay.
allegedly. The bank has not come out to refute it. My
Okay.
Gil got $200,000 in loans,
All
and it
right,
was for
please.
public knowledge. And if it's not, that's what we should have, a banking committee in Liberia, and we do. And we got
Okay.
people like Obani Sherman, this corrupt man who can't even leave the
I
country.
think, Bobby,
So,
just for the protection of the show, we should
Yeah.
say
but I
allegedly.
know some of y'all got your connection with who I can
It's
speak for
not a matter
myself,
of connection. It's
and
just the
I'm
basic
responsible for
people.
myself. And
Yeah.
everything I seen here, lastly, everything I seen here, you got LBDI in 2019, they lost $58 million. In 2020, they lost $3.9 billion. So the
Wow.
bank is unprofitable.
Well, I beg you, let me bring in somebody else. I know Willie had his hand up. He wanted to chime in. Go ahead, Willie.
Yeah, your question before was more about the economy, and
Yeah.
I guess I really didn't link the two as far as you saying how is that linked to the banking system, and well, I just wanted to say that in connection with what Alex is saying about the banking sector in the country, the problem with the Liberian banking sector is that it has just systemic problems, right, that need to be addressed, right? Um, as you stated or you were trying to allude to in your first question, yeah, the largest business depositor or creditor of the banks in Liberia would be the Liberian government. I mean, the other companies in the country are very small, and the government really has taken advantage of this relationship where they have borrowed a lot of money from these banks and they have not been able to pay, right?
Okay.
When I was growing up, we went through a time where all of the banks in the country collapsed. I mean, it went from the
Oh, we've lost Mr. Dillon again. I mean, one
No,
thing I
Joshua.
remember in Liberia, though,
from
this was. Oh, go ahead.
all right. So from Dutch Bank to Luby Bank to, I mean, the Tradefco Bank, all of those banks,
FDIC,
all the
FDIC,
Liberian-owned banks, FDI,
Mm-hmm.
FBIC, all of them collapsed, during the war. And towards the end of the war, we started seeing foreign banks come in the country, Echo Bank, and then GT Bank, and all these other banks. Now, most of the banks in the country are all foreign banks, but like I said, the government is heavily indebted to all of these banks. Now, the true role of a bank in the economy should be to be the lifeblood, to use the credit and the flow of money to be the lifeblood of
Economy.
credit and the ebb and flow of money in the economy. But yet and still, those banks are not able to do that because the government owe them so much money. Now, looking at how things look in the country now, the regular person is supposed to be able to put money in the bank. They're supposed to use that money to give loans out to other businesses and then make a little profit. And then they'll be able to share that with the depositors, and they'll be able to make a profit themselves. But that's not happening in Liberia because 80% of the population does not even keep their money in the banks. So the entire system is not working the way a bank is supposed to work, or the way the
Okay, so
banking system
Liberia
is
is
supposed to work in the
underbanked.
country.
Okay, Liberia is underbanked apparently. Let me go to Mr. George. Are
Let me,
we looking at a situation, Mr. George, where even outside of the financial or banking crisis in America and Switzerland, the Liberian banking sector was still in trouble? And if so, does this international banking crisis further add to it?
I'll say yes. I think, like one of the panelists said, we have a systemic problem, and that has dated back, I'll say, decades. The way we do business is bad. Um, Secondly, let's just focus on our how many banks we have in Liberia, how many are Liberian owned banks. For us
Okay.
to develop as a nation, we cannot have all of the banks in our country owned by foreigner. If they decide to leave today, we don't have any bank, you know. And let me ask you a question. If these people decide to say, okay, we'll slowly grow Liberia, or we will decide how to take money out of Liberia, they know how to do it. Only us
Wow.
can keep money into our country. Only us can develop our country. So if you look at the major institutions in Liberia, the major businesses, the major everything are owned by foreigner. We are fighting for the nightclubs, the bars, the little things. And that is why I've always advocated that we have to pull to our resources and look for and build corporations, and not just a shop or a store, or these little things that we continue to do. We need to start pulling together our resources from the diaspora or whatever it is, build corporations to help develop our homeland. Because if the foreigners are controlling our economy, they determine the growth of our country.
Hmm.
They can
I
decide
have
we'll grow at 1% this year, 2024, and we will grow at 1% if they choose to. So
Mr. George, I have a question.
yes,
Okay. This endorsement.
Uh,
You talk about Liberians need to come together and build corporation. All right. Do you think it's possible to build and run a corporation with all uh, efficient banking system?
well, I would say yes. If the foreigners are in our country and they got these corporations without an effective banking system, how are they functioning? I just want to know
Okay.
how are
And,
they functioning, and if they can function perfectly enough to
mhm.
make profit, then there's something fundamentally wrong with us.
Well, I can tell you how they are functioning. Most of the big companies in Liberia, all right, they own some of those banks. That's why they set up their own banks. For instance, I think Access Bank. Back then they had Euro Bank. They set up their banking system because
Well,
they don't have.
Alex, then you answer my question. Let's put our resources and buy one bank then, or buy better share in the bank and then do the same thing.
all right,
Yeah,
guys, but let me bring in Cole a little bit.
I'm serious. Let's put our resources and buy a piece of the bank and then do
Cole,
something.
I mean,
what's your take on it? Here's what I'm looking at here. Couple of things. I understand that the banking sector is in trouble. As a matter of fact, I was trying to think. I was in Liberia in 2000 and maybe 2007, 2008, around there, and I witnessed a bank get shut down by the central bank. It was International Bank. International Bank got shut down and locked. And I know I remember the head. I don't know if he was the head of central bank. Councilor Nibali Warner was the one that instructed that. And then the very next day, the bank was allowed to reopen, and Councilor Warner resigned. Okay, that was my first time seeing a bank shut down. I believe it was due to liquidity issues. Now, that's on the one hand. On the second hand, it appears to be that outside of the government, the biggest users of the Liberian banks are not Liberians, but probably foreign business people. Is that correct?
You're asking me.
That
I
is
don't.
correct.
I
And that
don't.
is correct. And it's important to point. It's important to point this out, okay? Because most times people say, and then I will let you go. Just want to make this one point. The businesses that come to Liberia that you see, whether it's the what you call Meta Steel or the MTN, wherever, do you know where they get their money from? They get their money from their banks in the country. So when you see other countries forming, I mean, other people forming corporations in Liberia or they're so successful, it's not that Liberians are incapacitated. It's simply that we don't have the tools. If the money they're giving to McGill and Samuel Jackson and the VP, if they're giving that money to people like you and who can go there and open businesses and Mr. Brooklyn, I can tell you we will have a lot of corporations in Liberia owned by Liberians that will hire a lot of people. So it's not matter
So what's
already.
stopping us? What's stopping us from pooling? We don't live in Liberia. What's stopping us from pooling resources? I mean,
You
what's
can't.
stopping us from pooling resources?
Okay.
Listen,
All right.
There's
Wait,
one
wait,
thing I
let-
want to say.
we're having this kind of chicken and egg.
Okay.
Go ahead. Go.
One thing
I'm
I want
sorry?
to say is, before Alex came in,
Uh-huh.
Cole was about to say something, and I
Okay.
really want to hear what she was trying to say. So,
Actually, you asked me to answer a question, and then Alex came in and took over.
okay, so Cole, please have the
Right,
floor.
Alex,
and do what you gotta do.
we're gonna be strict on you.
Yeah, I mean, you asked me a question, and Alex jumped in, so I was just coming in.
Yeah.
So Echo Bank, I do know, has the market share. It's more than 50% of the banking market share. It's probably an absorbent amount, probably closer to 70%. Echo
Oh,
Bank.
wow. I didn't know
So, and Alex, you can figure, you're quick with this kind of stuff. Let me know. But I think it's probably close to 65, 70% of the market, right? Echo Bank is owned by Qatar National Bank, about 27%, and then 21% by Nedbank, which is a South African investment company, right? So you've got South Africa and Qatar, who don't really have a lot of investment interest in Liberia. I mean, South Africa, outside of the cell phone, and cable television industry, there's really not a whole lot about South Africa going on in Liberia as far as South African investments beyond entertainment and telecommunications. That was shocking to me. This whole idea that we cannot do anything in Liberia unless the banks in Liberia are straight. In the 19th century and the late 19th century, very early 20th century, you had a group of African Americans called the Liberian Investment Corporation that founded the Liberian Investment Corporation. They pooled their resources and they were going to go and start developing trade networks with Liberia and other Caribbean countries as well. And they were going to base these resources in Liberia. They were then literally sabotaged by the U.S. government. They didn't want a bunch of African Americans investing in Africa, uppity African Americans with a lot of resources, pooling their resources and helping to develop Liberia and Liberia's industry. Same thing happened with the Meserado group of companies. You come up with this idea of self-sufficiency and you start creating these companies and it gets sabotaged, people get murdered, and then, we have a coup and the rest is history. So what we have to start to realize is that there are people who do not benefit from Liberians being self-sufficient and benefiting from their own resources and growing their own economy. So that's part of it. So a lot of the aid companies I'm sorry, the aid nations that are there helping to supposedly develop our country are steering us away from self-sufficiency, steering us away from food development, steering us towards cash crops and other things that will not really make us independent, and have food security. All of these things are related. They're not accidental. They're deliberate. It's intentional. And we as Liberians need to.
I'm gonna let you continue, but can we all mute our lines if we're not speaking? Because I'm getting some strong feedback. All right, there we go.
Oh
Go
yeah,
ahead,
that's
Philip.
better. So once we get to the crux of this and realize what the source of a lot of these problems are, it's easier for us to then put a think tank together and go towards the problem. What I see a lot of times on these talk shows with all these very brilliant, very educated young men and women is that we are focused so much on the symptoms and not the causal factors, right? So I shared with Alex earlier today, it's focusing on the spider web and not the spider. So the spider web is the dysfunction, the chaos, and all of this kind of stuff. Yes, it's very easy to analyze the spider web. We can all see it. We all get trapped in it. It's messy. But what's causing it? What's the causal factor and who's benefiting? What is the spider web capturing? Somebody is benefiting from this chaos and corruption, or it wouldn't exist. And that somebody is much bigger than who we like to point the finger at. And once we realize this, it's going to be much easier for all these brilliant minds to get together and find a solution.
Wow.
So that's what I wanted to point out. So everything you see happening in Liberia, it's not an accident that we're not, growing our own starch staple. That's not an accident. All of the aid that we get supports what? Palm oil and other things that we're going to export. So all of our whole agriculture industry is about extraction. Our mining industry is about extraction. Nothing's focused on production. This is not accidental. And this is not even really the plan and doing of our own elected officials. It's what those who control the purse strings have designed for us. So until we understand this and say, you know what, maybe we need to cut these purse strings and focus on something else, it's not working. Our advisors, what we think are our partners, our international partners, our international abusers, our international extractors really are responsible for the situation. And we're so complacent and so happy with aid that we don't really even try to solve our problems anymore. We let them tell us what the problems are and how to solve them. And then we all sit here and think we're so smart.
Real quick, how would you recommend solving that problem, not focusing on the spider web? Just real quick, 30 seconds, and then we'll move on to somebody else.
So as with everything, right? If you go to the doctor and you have a sickness, the first thing we want to know is your medical history. You have to go back to the source and diagnose the problem by looking at history. Looking at context. Nothing gets solved without having a proper understanding of how it got to be the way it is. So that's the very first step to solving any problem, is to understand it thoroughly. And not just on the surface looking at the symptoms, but how did this get this way? How did we start using the US dollar and why? How did these banks come into Liberia and why? And once you get that answer, finding the solution is so much easier. A proper and adequate and effective solution is so much easier.
And Bobby, before I lost my thought, let me just add to her. Why? I mean, many of us are United States citizens. What is the benefit to us being United States citizens? Let me just ask, what benefit has it brought to our homeland? We are not organizing ourselves to make major legislation, like she's saying, the invisible hand. Yeah, we do have the invisible hand in our country. Mm-hmm. Why are we not using the U.S. citizen statuses that we have? Mm-hmm. We got congressmen and women. We organize ourselves and say, you spend $500 million in Liberia for development. Show us where you spend this money. Because some of this money, my understanding, you give us $1, you send an expert behind $1, we got to get hustling, you take 95 cents out of the dollar to come back here, and you give us 5 cents. But yet you have given Liberia $1. So we are United States citizens now. We still want dual citizenship. We want all of this. We have not used our citizenship status to put pressure on the invisible hand that is hurting us.
Let me bring in somebody else. Let me bring in Mr. Mazale.
Sorry, to join you.
We had a discussion about that earlier when it comes to focusing on the spider and not the web. and this was regards to his area of expertise, which is engineering. Okay, how do you think we can get to the bottom of this issue? With, by the way, it's not exclusive to banking. I think we can all agree to that. It's
It's
extended
systematic,
across.
Bobby. It's systematic, so I think it can be seen every other sectors of our society.
Mhm.
So, like I was telling you, I mean, I think we have a mindset problem in Liberia.
Mhm.
And when Kawu was speaking, she mentioned about going to the root cause in engineering or project management. We call it the root cause analysis. You go dig way down. Why is things going this way? And if you can fix that root cause, you can be able to face whatever impact or whatever you are experiencing. So I think systematically we have been dealt the wrong card, from the foundation of our country, from the establishment of our country. We have been dealt the wrong card. And so if we are going to make any other changes in Liberia, I think we got to start working on the mindset and start dealing with how people view things, how we do things. And in my honest opinion, I don't think in my generation that's going to happen. Like I told you, I think what we can do is just plant the seed right now, and maybe it will grow later on. But for now, we got to
Okay,
work on the
that's why
mindset of our
you're
people.
running your leadership
Yeah, and
academy.
yeah, that's one of my focus. Going to Liberia and just trying to. We have a fixed mindset or mindset problem in Liberia, so I'm going to Liberia and trying to help people see things another way, help them create or cultivate that group mindset. And with that, I think we can, like I was telling somebody, I'm trying to, the seven sectors of society, I'm trying to at least have influence or create leaders that will have influence in those sectors of society. That is the religious sector, the business sector, governmental sector, the entertainment, and XYZ, even the family. I'm trying to at least produce leaders that will have the competence and the character to start impacting the sector gradually. My goal is to have maybe somebody say it's a wishful thinking, but at least 10%. I believe that's the tipping point. So if we can have 10% of leaders that are willing to work and do those things that will push the nation forward, I believe we can have that tipping point and other can join. So that's my goal.
All
I
right,
hope you
thank you
start in
so
the United
much,
States as well.
Mr. Dillon. Um, yeah, unmute yourself.
Yes.
All
So,
right, you want to contribute to
you
that?
know, I do agree with what Cole was saying, and also what the last uh, s-
Aliu
person
Mazale, yeah.
speaking, Leo was saying as well. But I think also a lot of times we focus a lot on the problems instead of thinking about solutions, and using the exposure that we have to enlighten people who may be in Liberia who may not know about those solutions. And what I'm talking about was the reason I alluded to the fact that about 80% or more of the people in the country do not even keep their money in the banks is because even though we keep printing new money, but the money's not flowing through the system. But there's been other African countries that came up with a solution, because this is not a Liberian problem exclusively. You find this all over West Africa and sub-Saharan Africa as a whole. But you see that there's countries like Kenya who came up with that. They were able to ride the weight of technology and come up with something called M-Pesa. Whereas just like in the 90s, when the cell phone wave went through Africa, most of the African countries didn't even have landline phones at all. But when the cell phone industry came to Africa, we were able to leapfrog that, and you started seeing even the least person in society had at least some sort of low phone that it could use. Now we need to look at other solutions too. These banks need to look at innovation to see, like in Kenya, where they have M-Pesa, where they're doing mobile banking on their phone and payments are being made from the phone. It's happening in Africa. In Nigeria now, we have a company called Paga, where they're doing e-commerce as well. So just like in the 90s, how we saw this thing happen with cell phones, it can happen if we're looking for innovative ideas instead of just not caring about the problem of the people and not caring about solutions. So I think, yeah, we can point fingers all day to Sherman and Johnson and this other person, or we can say, listen, this might work. Let's bring in these new ideas. It worked over there in Kenya. It's working in Nigeria. They're making strides towards a positive direction. Let's
So,
see if we
Mr.
can do
Dillon,
that too in our banking
what are
sector.
the banking institutions behind those mobile platforms? Those mobile banking platforms.
M-Pesa was started by the cell phone company, and they were
Okay.
doing so much business that
Okay.
eventually the banks started buying into it. Sort of how Visa and Mastercard are individual companies, but everyone
Okay.
works with them. The banks work with them, and they all help commerce to move forward. So
Okay.
I mean, there are solutions. So we can point at each other all day, or we can look for these solutions and try to bring them to our people. And we bring it to our people, we can make money too. Just like Lone Star. Lone Star the first one to bring cell phone. I remember we're in Liberia, we didn't know nothing about cell phones. Lone Star brought it.
So
Now we got people that are millionaires in Liberia from that,
everybody's
regular
using
people.
cell phones. So do people
Yeah,
use
Bobby,
these?
let me just buttress what he was saying.
All
I
right.
think we already have oh, something like that. They have the mobile money in Liberia where they,
Yeah.
transact. And I think it's being powered by Lone Star Company. I stand to be corrected, but something like that is in Liberia. Now, my only concern with that is these regulations, because we noticed that financial technology company don't have regulation, and this kind of create room for uh, a lot more corruption, like money laundering and kind of stuff like this. So that would
I
be
think
my
my next question was so the mobile money and Impasa, all of these entities, they seem to be engaged in more transactional as opposed to maybe borrowing money. Let's say I'm a business owner and I have mobile money. Can I borrow money from the bank to buttress my business, or is it just for transactions?
Okay. Let me make sure I understand the question. You're asking if the mobile money in Liberia can be used in other ways outside of just transactional
Yeah, exactly.
movements. All right.
Mhm.
In relating that to M-Pesa in Kenya, it also stores value. The what they have in Liberia now with mobile money, it doesn't store value. People just transferring money from here to that's a money transfer
Explain
thing.
what you mean by
But in
store
order to
value.
store value and be able
Hmm.
to pay for products, with, from person to person, business to business, outside of just going through a bank, that's not being
Okay.
done in Liberia. But the
Okay.
infrastructure has to be set up. So maybe we've
Okay.
taken the first stride, but maybe there are other steps that need to be taken. I'm just saying
Hmm.
technology can allow you to leapfrog, some of the problems that you think you have, and we've seen it happen. Where a country like Guinea, I forget the actual number, but they had a very small amount of landlines in the country. But when cell phones came, now the whole country, everyone has cell phones. So we can use technology to get ourselves on these on ramps and catch up with the rest of the world if we're looking for solutions. But a lot of times, I notice within our Liberian people, our community, or our country, we're pointing fingers so much, and we're looking for what the problem is instead of saying, okay, there is a problem. What is the solution? And sometimes, a lot of times, you don't have to even create the wheel. The solutions are already out there. We've been working for some of our brothers and some of our cousins. So maybe we can just implement that too. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah,
Well,
I
well,
agree with you. I mean,
Alex Ellis Jones
yeah.
for the
Well, the
solution.
problem, the
we've had
problem.
many shows already, and it seems we the theme of all of our shows is how Liberia is lacking in terms of systems and structures from one industry to another. We had another show next week. It'll be the same thing, right? The theme will be the same. But what can we do to actually? I think that was the reason this forum was set up, the Business and Economic Forum, where we can make meaningful movement. All right, not just suggestions, not just recommendations. Liberians are good at that. But what kind of movement can we make, Mr. George, to ensure that we do establish you're the head of the Liberian Business Association in the U.S. How can we establish these corporations, and then we can invest in those things?
I think my fight over the years have been for Liberians to one, start to think positively about our homeland.
Okay.
Do we have issues in Liberia? Yes, we do. Are Liberians afraid to go home because of security? Yes, we are. Is Jackson, George afraid of driving to North Minneapolis or somewhere today? Yes, I am. You know, uh, I'm serious. We just had Liberians shot two Liberians here in Brooklyn Park in Minneapolis. So safety is an issue, and we understand all of that. But take for instance what Willie just said. There is problem, and entrepreneurs find problems and find solution to the problems. We are business people. We are traders. 90% of Liberians doing business, we are just traders. We are not looking at the entrepreneur part of business. And that's what I'm saying. Take, for instance, what he said. There's Orange, there's MTN, there are all these facilities in Liberia, right? All we
Yes.
got to do is to pull our resources and do the other transactions that they are not doing because the platforms are already there. Let's get together. Look at a resort in Liberia. If you went to Edina, River says, Cape Mount, Maryland. But we are so focused on the problems that we forget the solution. I always ask the question, let's be Liberian and think Jewish. If the Lebanese are in our country and they are building results, they are building housing, how are they doing it that we can't do it? Now, you will say because the foreigners and other stuff, but look, let's learn what they're doing. For me, let's
Yeah.
learn the best out of what they're doing and make it work for us. Then we can begin to fix what we want to fix.
Okay. Yeah, I tend to agree with you. But
Can I come in?
look,
Okay.
yeah, call you coming. We
I
need a
just have a question. So Liberians we do have resorts, and we do have Liberian-owned businesses, right? Um, like there was a Liberian that opened a nail factory. We have Liberians that open plastic manufacturing companies. So it's not that Liberians are not doing anything, and we do have Liberian-owned resorts, quite a number of them actually. Um, that's not enough. So I do like what you're saying about the think Jewish, be Liberian kind of thing. I don't know if I understand what you're saying.
I think the problem with Liberians having business, we don't open up our business for investment. We own our own
So
businesses and we stay there. If you ask a Liberian, say, send me all the paperwork, show me your balance sheet, show me 3 years of your books. Everybody hide the paperwork, everybody hide everything. They don't want to open up. Before I bought my
I
liquor
mean,
store, I
my
went
brother.
5 years backwards, right? I asked this guy for 5 years of his paperwork to see the strength of his liquor store to see if I could buy his liquor store. In Liberia, you ask somebody, give me 5 years of your paperwork to see if the business is profitable. Give me things. It's hard to see those things.
Right. So that was what I was going to say next. What I was going to say is, so it's not that Liberians are not opening businesses, is that they're not opening businesses correctly and they're not doing so lucratively, right? So for people who, and if everyone could be a business person, that would be great. But everyone can't be. Most people in this world are supposed to be employed. That's just how it's always been, right? Most people in this world just need a job. They need 9 to 5. They need a salary so that they can live, so they can survive. For the brilliant few like yourselves, your job is now to create employment. Your job is now to employ the people, utilize the human resource, the natural resource, and all the other resources to develop the economy. How do you do it from here? The same way the Koreans do it from here, the same way everyone else does it from here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Right,
so
guys.
it's not impossible. So I just wanted to, the reason I wanted to come in after you is I just wanted to say it's not enough for us to just say, oh, Liberian people should be opening businesses, because they are. They're just not doing it to the level that you're envisioning. And that was just the distinction I wanted to make.
All right. Thank
And
you
I
so
think
much.
one thing,
Guys, we're
Willie,
going to be wrapping up at 7:35. So let's just do closing statements and then call it a night, okay? Who wants to go first?
Okay,
Let
I
Alex
think I'll
go.
go first.
All right.
let me go first.
So yeah, I think I can sit through this.
Alex, we're too quiet. Alex, you can talk now.
I'll tell you guys something, okay?
Hold on, American citizen. Alex not an American citizen. He's running
This,
for
this,
president.
this, this is the point. This is the fundamental problem I think we have is that you're talking about finding the causes of the problems. People have. People have written papers on Liberia. You go to IMF, you go to World Bank, you go to New York Times. There are solutions for these things that are already out there. And one of the solutions is you do need good leadership, political leadership. You can't escape that. You can't open a business in a country where it takes you almost 6 months just to get a business paper. It's impossible. Unless you want to be leveling man to be bribing your way like everybody else. You cannot run a economy like that. So you can make the argument that the leveling people do it. Yes, they're doing it at the disadvantage of your country. Another thing here is that I look at some of the profile of the people who run in Liberia economy, because I'm not here for the social side and the other. I'm here for business and economics, right? I don't know any country in the world that you say you want to grow your economy, you want to grow businesses, set up corporation, and then you have people who are not competent. Look at the Minister of Commerce. This woman never people. She came from school. She hasn't written a business paper in her entire life. What qualifies her, okay, to become commerce minister of a third world country that has all the challenges? She may be an educated person, she may be a wonderful person, but she is not qualified.
Yeah.
Because her job is to create these corporations to bring Liberian businesses together, the commerce chamber, but she doesn't know how to do that. So anybody can go to Liberia and say, "Hey, I want to start a non-profit. Let's change 10%." It's a far cry. It's not going to work. You need national leadership. You need a Federal Reserve like the central bank policy. You can't run a country where you got 70% unemployment, you got 15% interest rate. Your inflation, you can't even calculate it correctly. You say 9%, which doesn't make any sense. Those are the fundamental things that you need. Rwanda has those things. Botswana has those things. Seychelles has it. Until Liberia can at least have that down. Good business and economic management that can now regulate banks, push commercial lending. You can't deliver apples from an orange tree. So my bottom line, my closing statement is
close it.
solutions are not there. Well, you're cutting me off, you're monopolizing, so I gotta finish it. You have it. I have written dozens of papers on how you set up industry in Liberia. The people can't even read it, much less understand it. And it has to do with bad government leadership. That's where it starts. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jones. It's a pleasure having you on the show tonight. We'll move on to Mr. Mazale.
Yes, I mean, like Ellie said, everything rises and falls on leadership, and this is what the Liberian Leadership Summit is looking at, hoping to create leaders that are competent and have good characters. And so we know that we have issues in Liberia, and one of the things that happen with us, we focus more on the issues than the solution. But I implore everybody here to at least, when you identify the issues, you can go ahead and start putting into place some solution. I mean, the smallest things that we can do in Liberia to push the country closer to what we want it to be would be very essential. So let us just not talk, let us walk the talk. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mazale. Okay, Mr. Dillon.
Yes. Well, first of all, I just want to tell you guys thank you for allowing me, giving me the privilege to be here today to discuss these issues. Just closing, I just want to say that we have a lot of problems in Liberia, stemming from the government to the economy, to different sectors, like we're talking about banking today. But all I'm asking is, at the end of the day, we're privileged to be on this side of the world, and we've been exposed to a lot, and we even understand, the trending issues and even the cutting edge solutions to problems that are faced all over the world. So, I mean, I would just like to challenge all of us here and all Liberians, those who are watching, that we can use our expertise, we can use our knowledge, we can use our exposure to be able to take those, those expertise that we have, and take it back to our country, and be able to form a more wholesome, functioning society that would be able to move forward. It all starts with you making a difference with yourself, and then you projecting that forward into the world. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. It's a pleasure having you on the show tonight as well. We'll go to Mr. George, and then we'll have Madam Cole close out.
So let me thank you guys again for the opportunity. I think we have to be the change we hope for. You know, I think we need to put down our pride as Liberians and learn from the people who are doing things. It's not so far. Rwanda is there, Kenya is there, Ghana next door developing, Sierra Leone is doing well. You know, we just need to read, open our eyes, tweak what is working. We can take from Rwanda, tweak it to fit our needs, and make it work. But I think most of the time, like we say, we are boss on the problems, and many of the time we are not solution focused. We are personal, we are petite. Even if Alex was telling me something he knew because he's Alex, I will not listen to him. Alex will tell me car coming to kill you. I will stand at the car will kill me because Alex is telling me the car is coming. And sometimes, as Liberian, we need to put away our pride. Our
Yeah,
country is too small. We are too sophisticated. Look, Liberians are smart people. We're not crazy people. We're smart people. It is our smarts that got us like this because everybody too smart. You know, so I beg all of us, Radio Land, Liberians in the diaspora, Liberian at home, we need to bridge this gap between Liberians at home and Liberian abroad. We need to open our minds and accept change.
yeah,
Only only when we as Liberian agreed as a people to develop, then we will develop. Thank you.
All right,
excellent.
thank you very much, Mr. George. And by the way, we'll be looking to get some real concrete proposals and suggestions from all of you as far as how we can move Liberia forward. I'll turn it over to Madam Cole to give her closing statements, and then I'll close us out.
So I agree with everything that Alex said, except in the reverse. In our situation, we have to create the government that we want. And we can't sit and say we're going to wait for the government to create itself. In a democracy, it's the citizens and their resources that steer and create and evolve the government to what it can function the way they want it to function. So this kind of change that we want, the kind of regulations we want, the kind of systematic um, uh, correction that we want to fight for, we have to do that ourselves. And so part of the challenge here is we will have to take some risk for our country. We will have to go in and do some investing and start to create things and have the influence we need to affect change. It's not going to happen without us being at the forefront. The private sector needs to lead that cause. Right now, the government is beholden to the countries that are giving it aid and the business people that are giving them bribes, not the citizens. And it's the same way all over the world. At the end of the day, cash rules your country. So if we really want to have influence over our government, we need to pool our resources and do so. That's all I have to say about that. We have to get in there and start making money. You know, some of the reason I got into the private sector instead of the public sector is because the public sector doesn't pay. So you go into where you can make, you know, those commission dollars and things like that. So it is what it is. You have to meet your goals, you have to do the things that are necessary. People are in Liberia investing because it's lucrative. That all of those problems are opportunities for job creation. All of those problems are opportunities for investors. Those investors should be us.
Thank you so much, Madam Cole, and of course, thank you to our panelists for being here tonight. If you've enjoyed this show, those of you in Radio Land or TV Land, we'll be back here again next Monday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with another interesting topic and probably our illustrious panel here. We're also going to be the Business and Economic Forum is also going to be live at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on Fridays uh, to cover topics as well. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, and you all have a very good night.
Just
Thank
one
you.
quick thing now. Everyone on the panel is illustrious. I'm the man of the people. I'm a common man. So you guys
All
Not the
right.
politician.
We deliver the news to your door. Breaking news, top headlines, the big story, the latest update, and all you need to know are only available on the African Actions Network, 2A Radio and TV.